My brother mocked me at my niece's birthday. You'll always be a loser. He laughed, forgetting that I was paying for everything. So I left without paying, and then my phone exploded with 27 missed calls. I stood in front of my parents' house, holding a dollhouse wrapped in one arm and a gift bag in the other. The decorations on the porch were cheerful. Pink balloons tied to the railing, a large bright sign that read, "Happy Birthday Princess Lucia." The sound of children laughing echoed from the backyard. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The door flew open and there she was, my mother, dressed in her usual pastel cardigan, the scent of vanilla cake wafting through the air. But the moment she saw me, her smile vanished. "We don't want you here today." I blinked. "What?" Then I heard a voice behind her, clipped, sharp and unmistakable. "This isn't a place for losers," my brother Javier said, placing himself beside her, arms crossed, a slow smirk spreading across his face. Felt like a slap. Before I could respond, he snorted and shook his head. "Brother, presenting yourself like this? Cringe." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Lucia doesn't even care if you're here. Why don't you do yourself a favor and leave before you embarrass yourself?" I felt the same wave of discomfort that washed over me at every family gathering, every dinner, every holiday. The way they looked at me, their eyes drifting to my messy hair, my wrinkled sweatshirt, the dark circles under my eyes from so many sleepless nights spent programming. I tightened my grip on the gift bag, swallowing the lump in my throat. I barely contribute? Cringe. Lucia doesn't care. A memory hit me. Barely 6 months ago, Javier had shown up at my apartment looking desperate. "Brother, I just need a little help with Lucia's tuition," he'd said, his voice drenched in false humility. "It's just temporary. You know I'd do the same for you." That same night I transferred the money, no questions asked, no hesitation. And now I was a loser. I looked at my father, who was standing behind them, averting his gaze as if he couldn't even meet mine. My mother shifted uncomfortably, but didn't say anything, as if they had rehearsed this moment, as if they had all silently decided that I no longer belonged in that house. I could already hear my mother's inevitable excuse if I confronted her. "It's not about the money, honey, it's just the way you present yourself." Right, because in their world success wasn't measured by intelligence or skill. It was measured by designer suits, luxury cars, and golf memberships, not by sleepless nights debugging code, not by patents, not by six-figure contracts from Madrid that they never bothered to ask me about, that never required me to leave my apartment. For them, I was still the same awkward, scruffy kid who never quite fit in. Something twisted in my chest. Pain, anger, disbelief. I could feel the words rising in my throat. The protests, the indignation, the demand for an explanation. But then, as quickly as the rage appeared, it vanished. I exhaled slowly. "Fine," I said, stepping back from the doorway. "If that's what you think." I turned and walked back to my car, placing the gifts on the passenger seat. But just as I was about to close the door, my eyes drifted to the house, specifically the backyard. Through the window, I glimpsed Lucia running around in her birthday dress, laughing as she played with the other children. She had no idea what was happening at the front door. For an instant, I almost reconsidered. But then Javier's words echoed in my head again, that smirk, that laugh. "This isn't a place for losers." I clenched my jaw and sank into the driver's seat, my hands tightening on the steering wheel as a cold certainty settled over me. For years, I'd convinced myself I was part of this family, that it mattered. But I wasn't a brother. I wasn't a son. I was a walking ATM. No place for losers, huh? Well, let's see how they do without this loser funding their lives. I didn't turn on my phone for 2 days. I needed silence. No manipulative messages from my mother. No "let's put this behind us" from my father. And definitely no mocking, condescending texts from Javier. I wanted them to sit with their decision, to feel what it was like when I wasn't there to pick up the pieces. But on the 3rd day, curiosity got the better of me. I turned on my phone. 27 missed calls. 15 voicemails. 32 text messages. My lips curled into a smile. There it was. "Mom, I don't know why you're acting like this. Javier didn't mean it. Call me." "Dad, let's be reasonable. You know how family works. Javier didn't mean it. Grow up." "Mom again. Lucia's been asking for you." I rolled my eyes. Oh, now you remember I exist. The last message caught my attention. Carla, Javier's wife. I'm sorry about what happened. Call me when you can. That gave me pause. Carla had always been quiet, always went along with whatever Javier said. But there was something different about her message. It sounded urgent. I wasn't in the mood to call anyone, but I typed a reply. Why are you apologizing? The 3 typing dots appeared immediately, then her response. Because Javier is losing it. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Define losing it. This time she hesitated. Then, we're in trouble money-wise. He was counting on you for Lucia's birthday party. He already spent way more than we had because he assumed you'd pay for it later. When you didn't, he exploded. He's bad. Really bad. I let out a sarcastic laugh. Of course he did. 4 years I'd been the invisible safety net beneath him, always catching him before he hit the ground. This time I cut the strings and let him fall. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the half-eaten container of takeout on my desk. Beside it, my monitor glowed with an open terminal window, lines of code flashing across the screen. I was in the middle of debugging something important before this, something that paid my bills, something that actually mattered. And yet, here I was again, caught up in my family's stupidity. A normal person would have let it go. Would have let Javier face the consequences of his own arrogance. But I wasn't feeling particularly merciful. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see him squirm. That night, I drove past my parents' house not to go in, just to look. And it was glorious. The decorations were gone, the pink balloons lay deflated in the trash. The bright Happy Birthday Princess Lucia sign hung by a single side, half torn by the wind. Javier's car was still in the driveway, but the arrogant energy was gone. In its place, I saw movement behind the curtains, someone pacing back and forth. I rolled down the window just in time to hear something beautiful. Javier's voice yelling, "I don't care, Mom. He's doing this on purpose. He wants to humiliate me." I stifled a laugh. "Oh, buddy, you did that all on your own." I couldn't hear my mother's response, but I imagined it. The same old overprotectiveness, the same tired excuses. "Javier isn't the problem, honey. The world is unfair to him." Yeah, right. Then out of the corner of my eye I saw Carla. She was sitting at the dining room table, her face buried in her hands. Even from a distance I could tell she wasn't just tired, she was done. I'd seen that expression before. On my own face. Halfway home my phone vibrated. Carla again. I answered. "Tell me." She sighed. "Javier's out of control." Define out of control. "He's been yelling at your parents for hours, blaming them for not convincing you to fix this. He's furious because now he has to." She hesitated, then let out a long sigh, as if preparing to drop a bomb. "Now he has to sell his car to cover the debt from the party." I blinked, then burst out laughing. Oh, the irony. The same brother who mocked me for driving a used practical car, the same one who said real men drive luxury cars, now had to sell his overpriced status symbol because he overspent, expecting me to bail him out. I leaned back in my seat, shaking my head. "Tell me you recorded that." "Should have," Carla admitted. "You would have loved it." "Oh, I'm enjoying it already." She was silent for a moment. Then, quietly, "Can I hook you up with some?" "Go on. Why'd you put up with it for so long?" That question stopped me cold. Flashback. I was 13, hunched over the family's ancient desktop computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I had just finished my first program, a simple script that solved algebraic equations. Javier, then 16, strolled into the room, glanced at the screen, and let out a mocking laugh. "Seriously? You spend your free time doing this?" I grinned, excited to explain. "It's a basic solver. You input an equation and..." "God, you're such a nerd. No one cares." He pressed the power button on the monitor. The screen went black. I stared at it silently, stunned. My mother, passing by, chuckled. "Honey, you should go out more. Do something normal for once." Normal. That was the first moment I understood that no matter how smart I was, my family would never care. Present. I ran a hand over my face, Carla's question still ringing in my ears. I thought if I kept giving, eventually they'd see my worth. That they'd treat me like family instead of an ATM. She exhaled, then inhaled deeply. Yeah. And somehow, for the first time, I believed her. For the first time, someone in that house actually understood. I looked at the road ahead, my fingers tightening on the steering wheel. I hesitated. I thought, if I kept giving, they would see my worth eventually. They would treat me like family instead of an... Carla inhaled sharply. Yeah. There was a pause then. I get it. And somehow, for the first time, I believed her. That night, I slept like a king. The next morning, Javier had officially listed his car for sale. My mother left me 3 more voicemails, each one oscillating between "you're hurting your family" and "your brother is going through a hard time. Please be the mature one." I deleted them all. By the end of the week, Javier's car was gone. By the end of the month, Carla and Lucia were too. Turns out, once Javier couldn't keep mooching, he took out his frustration on her. And Carla wasn't as weak as he thought. She took Lucia, filed for divorce, and moved in with her sister. The last message I got from her was simple. Thank you. And Javier? Well, Mom and Dad of course took him back in. But with his credit ruined and his luxurious lifestyle dismantled, he wasn't the golden child anymore. So much for no place for losers. I sat in my apartment one night, sipping whiskey as I scrolled through his newly created GoFundMe page. Hard times. Just trying to get back on my feet. Any help is appreciated. I exhaled a laugh and shut off my phone. No place for losers, huh? Looks like he finally figured out where he belongs. Javier's downfall was delicious, but the best part? He still didn't get it. Even after selling his car, moving back into our parents' house, and watching his wife and daughter walk away, he still acted like the victim, like the world had wronged him, like I had wronged him. And I was furious. I knew at the instant my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Javier. I hope you're happy. You ruined everything. I smirked. Blocked. A minute later my email chimed. You need to fix this. You're a selfish prick. You don't even care about Lucia. Blocked. 5 minutes after that my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. I didn't answer at first. Just let him stand there, stewing in his own misery, like a pathetic salesman who already knows he's not going to close the deal. And then they go, and then they go, and then they go. I rolled my eyes. Fine. Coming. When I finally yanked open the door, Javier stood there, disheveled, sweating. More desperate than I'd ever seen him. You think this is funny? He spat. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I think it's hilarious. Javier's eye twitched. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Oh, more than you know. His jaw tightened. Lucia cried when Carla took her. That doesn't matter to you. I snorted. Lucia cried because her father is an idiot who ruined his own life. Don't put that on me. He blinked, then sneered. I think I'm free. Javier flinched just a little. Then his face contorted in fury. You're a selfish prick. I sighed. Still here, Javier? He clenched his fists, his chest rising and falling rapidly. But he wasn't a fighter. He was a talker, a manipulator, a beggar. And right now begging wasn't working. This isn't over. He pointed a finger at me like some cheap movie villain. I gave him a slow, mocking nod. Sure. I can't wait for part 2 of your sob story. Then, with all the dignity of a drunk raccoon, Javier stalked away down the hallway, muttering insults under his breath. I closed the door and exhaled. What a joke. A week passed. Then 2. No texts. No emails. No surprise visits. For the first time in years I had peace. Until one night my phone vibrated. Carla. You have to see this. Attached was a screenshot of Javier's latest great idea. A long, dramatic Facebook post, full of half-truths and sob stories about how some people turn their backs on family when things get tough. Hashtag real men don't abandon their nieces just to prove a point. And of course the cherry on top. Hashtag it's okay, hashtag always being strong, hashtag I'll get through this alone. I almost choked on my drink. Strong? The guy who lived off my money for years? The same one who threw a tantrum because I stopped paying his bills? Oh, this was too good. I chuckled, picturing him smirking, being the villain he thought I was. It was time to put an end to it. I didn't comment on the post. That would have been too easy, too public. No, I wanted something better. Something permanent. So instead, I sent him a message. Strong men don't beg their younger brothers for rent money. They don't cry when they have to sell their car. They don't let their wife and daughter walk away because they're too busy feeling sorry for themselves. I waited, and as expected, 3 typing dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared, and then were gone completely. For the first time in his life, Javier had nothing to say. Good. I set my phone aside, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled. It was over. For the first time in years, I was free. And Javier? Well, Javier was finally learning what it really meant to be alone. The silence. That was the best part. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up to messages begging for money, emails full of emotional manipulation, sudden emergencies that they expected me to swoop in and fix. Javier had finally shut up. Or so I thought. Exactly 1 month after I sent that last message, my phone rang. My mother. I should have known it wasn't good news. Honey. Her voice was laced with forced warmth. We need to talk. I sighed, already bracing myself. Let me guess. Javier's in trouble, and you want me to fix it. There was a pause. It's not about fixing, honey. It's about forgiveness. I let out a dry laugh. Oh, is that what we're calling it now? Don't be cruel, she snapped, losing her patience. We're having a family dinner this weekend. Your father and I think it's time you and Javier sat down like grown men and worked this out. I glanced at my calendar. Saturday, 7 p.m. Oh, so you even picked the time for my public humiliation. How convenient. I leaned back in my chair, seething inwardly. Let me get this straight. You want me to sit across from the same brother who called me a loser and kicked me out of Lucia's birthday? The same guy who's been badmouthing me online? The same one who, let me guess, wants another favor, doesn't he? He just needs, she insisted. But there was something in her voice, a hesitation. And I knew it. Holy shit, I caught it in time. He needs something, doesn't he? Mom. She exhaled sharply. Javier just needs a little help getting back on his feet. I burst out laughing. Unbelievable. What is it this time? Another car? An apartment? Let me guess, he finally blew through all that GoFundMe money. You don't have to be so cruel, she snapped. I smirked. Oh, but I do. It's fine, she huffed. If you need to know, Javier has been having trouble finding work. He's in a bad situation, honey. He put himself in that situation. It's your brother. In silence. I let it hang there. Let the weight of my indifference sink in. And then I twisted the knife. You didn't care when he shut me out. My voice was cold. You stood there and let him humiliate me. You didn't stop him. Didn't say a word. That's not fair. I cut her off. And now that he's suffering, suddenly we're family again? Another silence. Then finally she sighed. So you're not coming? No, Mom. I'm not. And for the first time in my life, I was the one who hung up first. I thought that would be it. I thought my parents would stay upset. Javier would wallow in his own misery, and I'd go back to enjoying my peace. But Javier was always so predictable. Because that Saturday, at exactly 7:42 p.m., my doorbell rang. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. I sighed. I knew exactly who it was. And I already knew exactly how this was going to go. Javier was about to beg. And I was about to relish every second. I checked the peephole. Oh, this was going to be fun. I took my time opening the door, let him stew in his own frustration. When I finally yanked it open, there he was. Hands shoved in his pockets, eyes wide, lips already pursed in some poorly rehearsed excuse. I smirked. No family dinner at Mom's? He clenched his jaw. Let me in. I leaned against the doorframe. Why? His nostrils flared. Because we need to talk. I pretended to consider it. Yeah, no. I started to close the door, but he wedged his foot in it. And that was a mistake. Fine, I said, pushing the door open just enough to step out onto the porch. Say what you came to say. Then leave. Javier exhaled sharply. Look, man, I know we've had our differences. I laughed. Is that what we're calling it now? He glared at me but pressed on. I just need a little help, okay? There it was. I crossed my arms. Let me guess. Money. His eye twitched. That GoFundMe didn't go far, huh? I tilted my head. Oh, mom and dad finally told you they weren't going to keep supporting their deadbeat son? Just stop it, man. He exploded, his face flushing red. I grinned. Why? Am I wrong? He sucked in a sharp breath, then ran a hand over his face. His voice dropped to a desperate murmur. I just need a loan, okay? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, so now I'm good enough to help you, Javier? He swallowed hard. Yeah, I get it. I went too far. I looked at him and for a second I almost believed him. But then I saw it. The same glint of entitlement in his eyes. The same expectation that he would get what he wanted. That he always got what he wanted. And I grinned. Oh, buddy, I said, stepping closer. I don't loan money. His face fell. What? I leaned in a little further. I give money. For a brief moment, his eyes flickered with hope. And then I finished him off. But only to people who deserve it. The hope died. I patted him on the shoulder, hard enough to make him stumble. You'll figure it out, champ. Then, without another word, I turned and closed the door in his face. That was the last time Javier came to me for help. A week later, I heard from Carla that he'd finally gotten a job. Not a good one, but a job. Paycheck that wasn't mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel resentment. I just felt free. Because for the first time in his life, Javier had to stand on his own 2 feet. And for the first time in mine, I didn't have a single shred of regret for letting him fall. 6 months. That's how long it's been since I slammed the door in Javier's face. Since I stopped answering my mother's manipulative calls. Since I finally decided it wasn't my responsibility to fix their lives. And let me tell you, those 6 months were pure bliss. No urgent requests for money. No entitlement-filled texts. No walking ATM treatment. Just silence. Update. Days passed, and while I still felt the relief of no longer being my family's personal bank, a small doubt started creeping in. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the messages I'd ignored. My mother's manipulations, my father's passive-aggressive attempts at reasoning, Javier's furious rants. It was predictable, but something in me didn't settle. Had I been too harsh? I wasn't second-guessing cutting them off financially. No, that was long overdue. But had I gone too far by walking away completely? By leaving Lucia behind? That thought weighed on my chest. I'd always made sure she had what she needed, not because Javier asked, but because she was just a kid. She wasn't to blame for her father's actions. And now she was caught in the crossfire. Open. Edit. Hesitating only for a second before typing my post. For cutting off my brother and parents, even if it means my niece might suffer? I laid it all out. The years of financial support, the insults, the abuse, the Christmas ban, and my final decision to say enough. But I also explained the doubt, the part of me that wondered if I was punishing the wrong person, if there was some way to set boundaries without disappearing completely. Press publish. And I waited. The responses came quickly. Auntie, your brother brought this on himself. Let him deal with it. Your niece has other family. You're not her only hope. You feel guilty because you're a good person. But don't let that guilt drag you back into a toxic situation. But there was one comment that really stuck with me. If you want to be there for Lucia, do it directly. Set up a savings account in her name. Buy her gifts separately. But don't let your brother manipulate you into funding his life again. I exhaled, rereading it several times. That actually made sense. I didn't have to put myself back through hell to make sure Lucia was okay. For the first time in days, I felt clarity. Messages. Ignoring the dozens of texts from Javier and my parents, and instead typing a message to Carla. Hey, I want to help Lucia, but I won't give Javier another cent. Let's talk. And just like that, I had my answer. What would you do in my shoes? Would you try to find a way to help Lucia without letting Javier take advantage of you again? Or would you walk away completely and let them deal with the mess they created?